Ryan Wheeler never saw the danger in Claire Monroe's smile. But behind her affection hid a twisted need for control that would turn deadly the moment he tried to leave. Ryan Wheeler was the kind of man who went unnoticed in a crowd. He liked it that way. He worked quietly as a freelance graphic designer, spent weekends playing video games with his brother, and rarely ventured outside his small social circle. At 26, he was content with a peaceful life in the suburbs of Dayton, Ohio. Then came Claire Monroe. She arrived like a whirlwind, bold, confident, and impossible to ignore. They met at a birthday party hosted by a mutual friend, and within hours, Claire had latched onto Ryan like he was the only person in the room. She laughed at his dry jokes, asked about his favorite movies, and said she loved how real he was. Ryan was flattered. It had been years since anyone looked at him like that. Claire was magnetic. She worked in marketing and had a personality that dominated every space she entered. Within a week, they were texting constantly. Within a month, Claire was spending nights at Ryan's place. Everything moved fast, but she made it all feel normal. Romantic surprises, late-night calls, and messages that said, "I miss you already," even when they'd just parted hours ago. Ryan's friends teased him that he was finally in love, and he believed it. Claire made him feel special in a way no one else had. She praised him, supported his work, and filled his days with attention. To him, it felt like the beginning of something real, but even early on, there were signs. Small things. Claire would get upset if Ryan didn't reply to texts within minutes. If he said he was too busy to talk, she'd go silent for hours, only to later bombard him with emotional messages saying she felt abandoned. Ryan thought she was just sensitive, maybe even a little insecure. He wanted to be patient. He liked her. More than liked her, maybe. So he ignored the warning bells and gave her what she wanted. More time, more reassurance, more of himself. Soon, Claire was always there. She didn't just visit. She started leaving clothes at his place. Then toiletries. Then she brought over her cat, saying it made sense for them to spend every night together. When Ryan hesitated, she looked hurt. She asked if he was hiding something, or if he didn't love her as much as she loved him. The guilt worked. Ryan let her in, fully and completely, without realizing he was handing over control of his life. Within 3 months, Claire was dictating almost everything. She criticized the friends Ryan kept, claiming they weren't good for him. She hated when he hung out with his brother, saying their bond was unhealthy. At first, Ryan pushed back. He told her he needed his space. But every time he tried to set a boundary, she would spiral, crying fits, accusations, emotional breakdowns. Then came the apologies, the flowers, the long letters saying she was just scared of losing him. It became a cycle, one Ryan couldn't escape from. Eventually, Claire asked for access to his phone. She said she had nothing to hide, and neither should he. Reluctantly, Ryan agreed. She memorized his passwords, began checking his messages, even reading his emails. She said it was about trust. Ryan tried to rationalize it. Maybe she just needed constant reassurance. Maybe she had been hurt in the past. He didn't realize that every compromise was another step deeper into her web. The control tightened. Claire started calling him multiple times a day, checking in on his work schedule, asking for pictures to prove where he was. If he was 5 minutes late replying, she'd accuse him of ignoring her. Ryan was overwhelmed, but he kept telling himself that all couples have problems, that things would get better. But they didn't. In fact, they were getting worse, fast. Claire began talking about quitting their jobs and moving to a cabin in the woods, just the two of them. She said the world was toxic, that people didn't understand their connection. Ryan laughed it off, but her tone was dead serious. She told him she wished they could be alone forever, just the two of them, no one else interfering. Her love was starting to feel like a cage. Friends started noticing changes in Ryan. He became withdrawn, quiet, tense. His social life disappeared, almost overnight. When anyone asked where he'd been, he made vague excuses. The truth was harder to explain. He felt trapped, but he didn't know how to leave. He still believed he loved her, but more and more, he felt like he was living someone else's life. What he didn't understand yet was that this wasn't a rough patch or a bad relationship. It was a countdown. Claire's obsession had only just begun, and the end would be nothing short of deadly. The transformation from love to control didn't happen overnight, but by the time Ryan realized how far things had gone, it was already too late. Claire had threaded herself into every corner of his life, mentally, emotionally, and even financially. Her demands, once disguised as affection, had become rules. Her presence, once comforting, now loomed over every moment like a shadow. Claire stopped working full-time just a few months into their relationship. She said she wanted to focus on them, that she didn't need the distractions of a stressful job. She encouraged Ryan to take on more freelance clients, even helped him manage his schedule at first. But her involvement quickly turned into surveillance. She controlled which clients he spoke to, how long he worked, and where he could work from. Ryan wasn't allowed to go to cafes or co-working spaces anymore. Claire said she missed him too much when he was out. She installed a security camera at the front door, claiming it was for their safety. In truth, it was another way to watch. Little by little, Ryan's life shrank. He barely left the house. He wasn't allowed to have private conversations on the phone. Claire would hover nearby, listening. If he texted someone, she'd ask to see it. If he didn't show her, she assumed the worst. She accused him of hiding things, of cheating, of trying to leave her. There was no proof, but Claire didn't need proof. Her paranoia filled in every blank space with suspicion. At first, Ryan argued. He told her he needed independence, that relationships needed trust. But Claire always had a counterpoint. She reminded him how much she loved him, how deeply she cared. Then she'd cry, saying she was afraid of being abandoned again. She would collapse into tears, sometimes hyperventilating until Ryan comforted her. It always ended the same, with an apology from Ryan and a new set of conditions from Claire. Soon, she began controlling who he talked to. She deleted contacts from his phone without telling him. She blocked friends on social media and claimed they were toxic influences. Ryan tried to reconnect with his brother once, but Claire accused him of choosing others over her. She told him that loyalty meant sacrifice, and if he truly loved her, he wouldn't need anyone else. Her grip extended beyond his social life. Claire started deciding what Ryan ate, what he wore, how he spoke. She criticized his clothing choices, claiming they were too childish or unattractive. She began dressing him herself, picking out muted tones and clean lines, saying it made him look more mature. When he tried to push back, she accused him of not caring about how she saw him. Ryan began giving in more and more, if only to avoid the outbursts. Even his sleep wasn't his own. Claire insisted they sleep at the same time, wake at the same time. If he stayed up late working, she would sit silently in the room, staring, until he turned off his laptop. If he woke up before her, she'd ask what he was doing, who he was texting, and why he hadn't waited for her. Every minute without her was a betrayal in her eyes. The isolation took a toll. Ryan stopped answering texts from friends. He ignored phone calls. When people reached out, Claire told them Ryan was busy, sick, or needed space. In reality, he was just tired. Tired of explaining, tired of defending himself, tired of pretending everything was fine. Behind closed doors, Claire's obsession deepened. She kept a journal filled with notes about Ryan's habits, his moods, his interactions. She wrote down how long he spent in the shower, what time he logged into his computer, and how many steps he took on certain days. When Ryan once jokingly said she was acting like a stalker, her expression went cold. She replied flatly, "I just know what's best for us." He didn't know how to escape. Part of him still clung to the hope that things would improve. He remembered how she used to be in the beginning. Loving, spontaneous, full of laughter. He kept waiting for that version of Claire to return, unaware that it had all been a facade. Claire wasn't losing control. She was tightening it, ensuring that every exit was sealed. Ryan no longer felt like a person in a relationship. He felt like a prisoner, confined in a beautiful house with someone who smiled when she said she loved him, even as she slowly erased every part of who he used to be. And yet, he stayed, too afraid of what might happen if he finally said no. Ryan's decision to leave came quietly, without drama or confrontation. He didn't pack a suitcase in front of Claire or shout his frustrations. He simply waited for a morning when she went to visit her mother and slipped away. He left a note on the kitchen counter, short, apologetic, and vague. He said he needed time to think, that he still cared, but he couldn't breathe anymore. It was the first moment of real independence he had felt in months. He drove straight to his older brother Lucas's house 2 towns over. Lucas had always suspected something was off with Claire, but Ryan had brushed it off for so long that no one knew how deep the situation had gotten. Seeing Ryan that day, pale, tired, and shaking, Lucas didn't ask many questions. He just let him stay. Ryan turned off his phone for the first 2 days. He knew the messages would pour in, texts, calls, voicemails. Claire wouldn't let him go easily, and she didn't. When he finally powered it back on, he had 47 missed calls and a flood of messages, growing more frantic with each hour. The tone shifted quickly from hurt and confusion to rage and desperation. She accused him of betrayal. She begged him to talk. She told him she was spiraling. She threatened to hurt herself. Despite everything, Ryan was still afraid for her. That's how control works. It makes victims believe they're responsible for the person who's hurting them. On the 3rd night, he agreed to meet Claire in a public place, just to talk. He thought he could explain, set boundaries, make her understand that the relationship had become unhealthy. Claire didn't show up at the cafe they agreed on. Instead, she showed up at Lucas's house later that night. She stood outside barefoot, eyes wild, sobbing and pleading with Ryan to come back with her. When Lucas told her to leave, she collapsed on the driveway, screaming that Ryan was her entire life, that she couldn't survive without him. The neighbors came outside. Someone called the police. When they arrived, Claire acted calm again, said everything was fine, and left without being arrested. But Ryan knew things were only getting worse. Still, part of him wavered. He agreed to go to couples therapy with her. He convinced himself it was the right thing to do. Maybe, with help, Claire could change. They sat on a couch together once a week in a neutral office, talking about trust, boundaries, and respect. But Claire manipulated the sessions the way she had manipulated everything else. She painted herself as the victim of abandonment and emotional neglect. She cried on command. Ryan, already unsure of himself and exhausted, found it difficult to defend the truth. The therapist gently warned him one day, off the record, that some relationships don't just fail, they damage. And that staying could have serious consequences. That night, Ryan told Lucas he was done. He planned to find his own apartment, cut ties, block Claire's number, and start over. He said he felt clearer than he had in months. For the first time, he imagined a future without her. And it didn't feel terrifying. It felt like freedom, but Claire wasn't done with him. She never would be. The next week, Claire sent Ryan an email. It was polite, cold, and oddly formal. She said she accepted his decision and wanted to return some of his belongings. She asked if she could come by when Lucas wouldn't be home, to avoid an awkward scene. Against Lucas's advice, Ryan agreed. He said he'd meet her, take the items, and say goodbye one last time. That day, Ryan never showed up for their meeting. Lucas tried calling, but there was no answer. The neighbors hadn't seen anything. Claire's car was spotted by a security camera a few blocks away from Lucas's home, but Ryan's wasn't. His phone pinged briefly near a park on the edge of town that afternoon, then went dark. It never turned back on, Lucas reported him. missing that night. When police questioned Claire, she told them Ryan had changed his mind, that he'd taken off again, said he wanted real space this time. She smiled calmly and offered to show them the last text he sent. But the text didn't sound like Ryan. It was stiff, robotic, too formal. The grammar was off. The wording. Strange. Lucas knew something was wrong. Ryan hadn't just walked away again. Something had happened. And Claire was the last person to see him. The search for Ryan began slowly, hindered by the lack of concrete evidence that anything criminal had happened. Adults went missing all the time, especially during emotional breakups. That's what the initial police reports said. Ryan's last known location was his brother's home, and the only new clue was the strange message Claire claimed he sent, saying he needed to disconnect for a while. To authorities, it sounded like a man escaping a stressful relationship. To Lucas, it felt like a lie. Lucas kept pushing. He handed over everything: texts, emails, voicemail recordings, showing Claire's obsessive behavior. He described how she had shown up at the house, how her mood changed in seconds, how she had once threatened to harm herself if Ryan left. Still, none of it was enough to open a criminal case. There was no body, no signs of a struggle, and no confirmed crime. But Lucas knew his brother. Ryan wouldn't disappear without telling him. Not unless something was very wrong. A week passed. Then another. Ryan's accounts went inactive. His bank card wasn't used. His phone remained off. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Lucas printed flyers, posted them around town, and pushed the case on social media. As interest grew, local reporters picked up the story. Then, a neighbor from Claire's street contacted the police. He hadn't said anything earlier, assuming it was none of his business. But something had bothered him. A few nights before Ryan disappeared, he had seen Claire dragging what looked like a heavy bundle into her garage late at night. It was wrapped in a tarp and loaded into the back of her SUV. The next morning, she was seen scrubbing the garage floor with bleach. That was enough for police to revisit Claire's house with a warrant. The search was extensive. Dogs were brought in. Teams combed through the backyard, garage, basement, and even plumbing. It wasn't until they started digging near the rear garden that the truth began to emerge. Beneath a fresh layer of soil, they found a shallow grave. Inside, wrapped in plastic and bed sheets, was the body of Ryan Wheeler. The scene was grim. His body showed no immediate signs of trauma, no stab wounds, no bruising, but a toxicology report revealed the real cause: poisoning. Ryan had been slowly sedated, likely over several days, with a mixture of sleeping agents and antifreeze. The method was cold, calculated, and methodical. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated. Claire was arrested the same day the body was found. She didn't resist. In fact, she barely reacted at all. She asked for a lawyer and said nothing during questioning. Her home, however, gave up more than she expected. In a locked drawer of her bedroom nightstand, investigators found journals, thick, detailed, and chilling. Claire had documented everything. Her entries described Ryan's daily habits, his moods, what he ate, when he slept, and how much time he spent on his phone. There were pages filled with fantasies of keeping him from leaving, of preserving their love, of making him still. Some entries detailed how she experimented with the dosage of the sedative, mixing it into food and drinks, writing notes like, "Less tonight. He's getting suspicious." There were lists of how to dispose of a body, options for burial, and potential alibis. More than a dozen internet searches from her computer revealed how much planning went into the crime: how to erase phone data, how long for antifreeze to work, how deep to dig a grave, how to make someone disappear and not get caught. It was clear that this hadn't been a spontaneous act. Claire had made a decision long before Ryan tried to leave. She just waited for the right moment to act. The evidence was overwhelming. Claire was charged with first-degree murder, among other offenses. Her trial would later reveal that she had A history of obsessive behavior in past relationships, though none had escalated to violence. Ryan had been the one who stayed too long, the one who believed love could fix control, the one who tried to escape and didn't make it out alive. The story shocked the community. Neighbors who once saw Claire as a charismatic woman now remembered odd moments, strange outbursts, and how Ryan always seemed quiet when she was around. Friends who hadn't heard from him in months were haunted by the silence. And Lucas, who never stopped searching, was left to live with the truth. His brother had been trapped in a nightmare disguised as love. Claire Monroe's trial became a media sensation. The phrase psycho-obsessive girlfriend echoed across headlines, turning a deeply tragic story into a nationwide spectacle. Courtrooms were packed. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. True crime forums dissected every detail of the investigation. But beneath the sensationalism was a disturbing story of emotional manipulation, psychological abuse, and a methodical murder carried out under the illusion of love. The prosecution didn't have to stretch to paint Claire as dangerous. They had her own words, the journals, the internet searches, the timeline she unknowingly built with her obsession. They laid out a chilling sequence, the calculated poisoning, the isolation, the emotional warfare. Ryan Wheeler hadn't simply died. He had been erased, step by step, by the woman who claimed to love him most. One of the most damning moments in court came when a forensic psychologist explained how Claire's behavior matched patterns of coercive control. Her domination wasn't just physical or verbal. It was complete, emotional surveillance disguised as devotion. The therapist who had briefly seen them also testified. She said that Ryan was clearly distressed, visibly anxious, and constantly second-guessing himself. But Claire, she noted, was calm, composed, and even manipulative during their sessions, often redirecting blame with practiced ease. Lucas Wheeler sat through every day of the trial. He listened to every horrific detail. He heard how his brother's body was found with traces of sedatives that had likely been slipped into food and drink over time. He learned how Claire had manipulated Ryan into believing he was responsible for her emotions. He saw the photos, the backyard, the grave, the bed where Ryan had unknowingly consumed his final meals.